This conference will now be recorded.
All right. So commercial property, actually, should be commercial coverage. Now I don't want to record it. Oh, man. No. Oh, well. We'll go through it. So commercial property coverage. If need be, I'll jump to another slide, but I think this should encompass most of what I want to review tonight. So if you haven't registered, consider it. Go to lgdstudy.com. Look for the property fire and casualty exam prep. Use a PayPal link. When you register, you'll have access for 60 days. And while you're studying, reach out if you have any questions, if you need clarification, additional information, what have you. All right. So the commercial package policy, you got to know these parts. All of them have conditions. So it doesn't matter whether it's a property policy, liability, inland marine, it's going to have conditions. Now, in the property section, we do have modules or parts, or I should say in the commercial package, we have modules or parts. Now, let me kind of reiterate. In a lot of your studying, you will see a commercial package policy, and it will basically classify coverage parts, like the property is a part, liability is a part, crime is a part. So they're different lines of coverage. Your exam will typically use modules. So it's kind of, they went a little crazy with the thesaurus. Instead of saying part, they're calling it a module. And so if you bought two or more, that would be a package. So if you bought property and liability, that's two modules, or your test will call it a modular policy. Now, if you only bought one part, that would be the monoline. Like commercial auto, a lot of times is sold by itself, and that would be a monoline policy, which is just one line of coverage. But again, two or more parts would be a package. Endorsements are additional charge for additional features and benefits. It's to help personalize the policy. In not all cases is an additional charge, but for the exam, yeah, typically it is a slight additional charge to add and benefits to the program, okay? So let's start with the conditions. And remember, these are in each of the coverage parts or each of the coverage modules. The cancellation condition, that means you, the insured, you can cancel the policy anytime. Just give proper written notice. The insurance company has to have a legitimate reason to cancel the policy. There's different types of cancellations. You have prorate, you have short rate, you have flat rate. Prorate, well, let's say you pay your premiums for the year. All of your property and casualty policies are short-term contracts. They're good for up to 1 year. So let's say you bought a policy, you paid for the whole year, and maybe you sold the business 6 months in. So you want to cancel the policy. Now, if you cancel out, right, since you paid for the whole year, the insurance company is going to keep the first 6 months premium. Since they're not going to cover you for the second 6 months, they'll return that premium minus a fee. See, when you cancel out, we have to process cancellation paperwork, and paperwork takes time. Time is money. And so this is what we call a short rate cancellation, is when the customer cancels out, the company keeps the earned premium, or the money they've earned, they've covered you, and return the unearned or unused premium minus a fee, like an overhead expense. And so basically, you got shortchanged for leaving us. Now, in the real world, if the client cancels out, it's typically a short rate cancellation. In real world, if the insurance company cancels your policy for whatever reason, they're going to keep the earned premium, and then they're going to return the unearned or unused premium, and there shouldn't be a fee associated with that. Now, that's called a pro rata or prorate cancellation. Keep the earned, return the unearned. Short rate is keep the earned, return the unearned minus a fee or an overhead expense. So anytime you hear short rate, you got shortchanged by a fee. All right. Now, for the exam, now that's real world. Remember, if client cancels out, it's short rate. Company cancels out, it's prorate. But the exam, they'll say the company cancels out, and they'll return the unearned premium minus an overhead expense. This would be known as what? And that would be a short rate cancellation because you got shortchanged. Now, in the real world, that doesn't work. all right? Because we, the company, cancel you out and we're going to penalize you with a fee for processing it. No, that's not how it works. But for the test world, they just want to make sure you know the concept. Now, if there is any premium refund, that premium refund is going to go to the first named insured. All right. Now, there's one more type of cancellation called flat rate. And flat rate is we void the contract, refund all the premium, and pretend like the policy never existed. Another phrase for that is called rescission of the policy. Cancel the policy, refund all the premium, pretend like the policy never existed. Okay? But that's a flat rate cancellation. Typically, if there's misrepresentation or fraud, that's what's going to happen. Changes. So this is a condition. This is who can request changes to the policy. Well, the first named insured. So if you have a partnership, like Bill and Bob, right, hardware store, they're both named, Bill and Bob are both named on the policy, but the first named insured controls the policy. And so if it's Bill and Bob's hardware store, Bill is the first one named. That means Bill gets any premium refund if there's a cancellation. Bill can request changes to the policy. Now, when Bill requests changes, it doesn't mean the change is going to go into effect. It must have insurance company approval. But that would be policy changes. Examination of your books and records. This condition says we, the insurance company, can examine your company's books and records during the policy period and for up to 3 years after coverage ends. Because the statute of limitations on claims is in most cases up to 3 years. Right? Because maybe a loss occurred, nothing happened, but a customer may come back and file a claim for up to 3 years later. All right? So you'll still want to keep your records. But the insurance company can examine your books and records, remember that, during the policy period and for up to 3 years after coverage ends. When you see inspections and surveys, this deals with underwriting and insurability. We, the insurance company, right, want to maybe do a walkthrough of your business to see what type of business you have, to see if it's something we even want to write. Now, you as an agent, you're called a field underwriter because if you're writing a business, you should go look at it. Is it the company look good? The building look good? Is it clean? If you wouldn't want to do business with this business owner, why would you try and write a policy on it and insure it? It seems like a hazard, right? I look at it this way. There's got to be pride in ownership. And so if you're driving around the neighborhood and you see a restaurant and realistically, if you wouldn't eat there, why would you try to insure it? You see what I mean? And so that's what you want to look at. But the underwriters may do an inspection or do surveys to determine if the business is insurable. That's what the inspections and surveys is about. Right? It's for underwriting. Premiums. Well, the premium condition says who is responsible for paying the premium. And again, that's the first named insured. Right? Again, if the policy is canceled, the first named insured gets the premium refund. So keep in mind, so even though maybe it's a partnership, Bill and Bob, right? Bill's the first named insured, Bill's the one who controls the policy. That's very common for the test. You may get like 2 questions just on that topic about the first named insured. Transfer of rights. Let's say you own a business, you have a commercial policy on your business, and you sell the business. Maybe you retire. Well, rather than the person purchasing the business from you running out and getting a whole new policy, since you already have a policy in force, when you sell them the business, why not transfer the ownership of the policy that you have on the business to them? So then they're now the owner of this policy, right? That's insuring this business. So they keep the coverages the same, right? The limits of insurance and the coverages you have on the business, but you're going to have to get insurance companies' written permission. You see, you've been running this business for, let's say, 15 years. And so you have some experience in this type of business. The person that's purchasing this business from you, let's say this is the first business they've ever owned or run. They don't have a lot of management background. That means being it's new, they're probably going to suffer more losses because they're inexperienced. And so you can transfer the ownership of the policy from you to whoever buys the business from you, but you're going to need insurance companies' written permission. Like I said, it gives them an opportunity to reevaluate the risk and possibly charge different premium. But this is called an assignment, transferring the ownership of the policy from one party to another. You can do that, but you got to have insurance company's written permission. So these are 6 common policy conditions that are pretty much in all your modules. Right? So each separate module or coverage part has these 6 conditions. So the modules or coverage parts that you need to be aware of is, well, first property, right? Very common. The building, right? Liability covers liability associated with your business. Crime, which we call it theft coverage on the personal line side. It's called crime coverage on the business side. Inland marine, just like you have a jewelry floater to raise coverage on your jewelry in case someone steals it, right? Well, for business, we have collectibles also. Maybe it's a jewelry store, and so you want higher amounts of coverage. That's what inland marine coverage is about. It's like a floater, right? And giving you all risk coverage pretty much anywhere in the world also. Boiler machinery. This would be the commercial equivalent to a home warranty. So if you buy a house, they offer you the home warranty, and it covers appliances in case they break down. Like your dryer doesn't work, right? You pay deductible, someone comes out there and fixes it. Well, this is kind of the same thing for a business. Maybe you have steam pipes, steam turbines, generators, and refrigeration equipment. And then if one of the appliances breaks down, right, then we have someone come out there and fix it. All right. Commercial auto. Now this is a wide range. This is you're in the automobile related business, like a dealership or a repair shop, or maybe a parking garage, parking structure. But this can also be part of you have a business and you have vehicles for your employees to use. So it's kind of a broad category. There's a wide range of commercial auto items here. Now, farm, even though it's listed here, it's kind of a blend of residential and commercial on one policy. Not only do you live on a farm, you also work on the farm. All right. And so it's a blend of residential and commercial on one program. All right. But it's listed here because it's primarily business focused. So for commercial property coverage, there are 4 causal loss forms. Now, normally you're used to 3, basic, broad, and special. But for commercial property, we have one more, earthquake, which covers earthquake. That's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. So basic, broad, and earthquake coverage are named peril forms. That means we have a list of perils. If it's on the list, it's covered. If it's not on the list, it's not covered. And then we have the special form. That's also called all risk or open peril form. We cover anything in the world that you could possibly imagine that happens to your business, except for this list of exclusions. Whenever you hear exclusions on your property coverages, think of the catastrophic items, okay? Nuclear risk, war, earthquake, flood, they're typically excluded, but also wear and tear and intentional acts. They're typically not covered by insurance. So if it's not on that list under the special form, it's included. Now, for evaluation, if a loss occurs, how are we going to pay? Well, for commercial property, we pay actual cash value. Now, usually with a homeowner's policy, we pay replacement costs for your home, the structure, right? We're going to rebuild it just like it was before the fire. But your personal belongings, like your clothes, your furniture, your pots and pans, we're going to give you actual cash value, which means whatever it costs to replace your clothes minus depreciation. So you basically get the used value of your items. Well, for commercial property, it's actual cash value on the building and actual cash value on your contents. And so understand, commercial property coverage is ACV on everything. And again, insurance companies require you to carry at least 80% of coverage to the value of the building. That's your 80% co-insurance. And we'll get into that as we go through this section, right? But make sure you get that equation down too. And for commercial property, there can be 13 coverage forms that you could add. One of the main ones would be glass coverage. Let me explain. As you can see in this picture right here, there's a ton of windows on this building. If the owner of this building had a commercial property special form, it would basically only pay $100 per window with a $500 per occurrence maximum. So if there was a major loss and this building was destroyed, the owner of the building would only get $500 to replace all the windows on this whole building. I mean, that's not even covering one wall on the ground floor. And so one of the coverage forms that you could add to your commercial property policy would be glass coverage. And glass coverage will basically give you, all risk coverage on all your windows. To show you how detailed it'll be, every window is lettered and numbered to show its exact position, and it's itemized on the information page of the deck sheet. I hope that little statement didn't go over your head. Initially, it might, okay, because this is a new language for a lot of you. So be wary of that. So glass coverage provides, gives you all risk coverage on your glass, on the windows, right? And it covers all the windows. Like I said, every window is lettered and numbered to show its position on the building. And they're actually listed on the information page, which is attached to your deck sheet. How's that? That's some detail, okay? So let's go into the causal loss forms, the basic form. Now, remember, for personal lines, it's a little different. Personal lines, you have a standard fire policy, which only covers fire, lightning, and removal. In the personal lines, a dwelling policy basic form covers fire, lightning, and internal explosion. And that's it. But for commercial property, our basic form does provide more coverage than that. So the basic form covers fire, lightning, and extended coverages. You got to know what the extended coverage perils are. Windstorm, hail, aircraft, riots, vehicle, explosion, and smoke. There's 7 perils that you can get in a package called extended coverages. And on your test, they might just use the abbreviations or acronyms EC. EC is for extended coverage. Right? The basic form also includes vandalism and malicious mischief. I just put vandalism here, but here and there on your test you might see VMM, right? Vandalism and malicious mischief. Sprinkler leakage is covered on the basic form. Now on the personal lines, it's not. On the personal lines, extended coverage, vandalism, sprinkler leakage needs to be added. Another thing your basic form provides coverage on the commercial side is sinkhole collapse and volcanic action. Now, I'm not saying volcanic eruption. I'm saying volcanic action. So a volcano erupts and drops ash on your building. This is going to cover that ash cleanup. But if a volcano erupts and, makes ground tremors and things like that, those are excluded. Okay? So that's the basic form. The broad form covers everything the basic form provides coverage for, but we'll also add some glass coverage. Remember that $100 window with a $500 max? That's what you get on the broad form. The broad form also covers falling objects. This is a tough test because you have to remember or memorize coverage parts of the policy, which part covers what. And it's very common to get questions where a commercial property broad form provides, or what type of coverage that a basic form does not include. And the most common answers will be falling objects and collapse, just so you know. So the broad form covers falling objects and collapse. The basic form does not. Right. And on the personal line side, it's the same thing. They do use the same kind of scenario. The broad form covers weight of ice, sleet, or snow, which typically leads to collapse, and accidental discharge of water. To understand losses, make sure your policy covers losses that are sudden and accidental. You have to be able to put a specific date and time to when that loss started. Then it can be covered. But if you have a slow leak, which causes, mold, mildew, or dry rot, that's not going to be covered. That's kind of chalked up to wear and tear. Right? So the loss must be sudden and accidental. And as you're going through your exam, an easy way to understand water damage is your policies cover water coming down like rain, sleet, or snow. It doesn't cover water coming up like sewer backup or flood. Right? So that's going to help you when you take your test. Remember, your policies cover water coming down, but not water coming up. All right? So then we have the special form. Remember, that's all risk or open perils. That means pay attention to exclusions. Common exclusions, like I said, the catastrophic items, earthquake, flood, nuclear risk, and war. They're catastrophic in nature. They do not lend themselves to predictability, and therefore they're typically not insurable. Some of them you could buy back. All right, earthquake, you could add it as endorsement or a causal loss form or a separate policy. And flood, you can buy back, typically provided through the federal government, through FEMA, the National Flood Insurance Program. We do have private insurance companies that can also provide flood and earthquake coverage, but for the exam, know that they're typically related to another program, okay? Just so you know. Wear and tear and intentional acts are not going to be covered either. All right, earthquake. Again, for commercial, there's three ways of buying earthquake. Number one we're seeing here is a causal loss form. Number two, some companies offer it as an endorsement for additional charge. We can add it on. And number three, you could buy a separate policy. Now, if an earthquake strikes, that would be an occurrence. And for the next 168 hours, which is 1 week, all the aftershocks that occur within the next 7 days or that 1 week from that first one counts as one occurrence. So there's only one deductible. So imagine you had an earthquake today, 2 days later, there's an aftershock that causes damage. And, the claims adjuster comes out, well, some of the damage is from the first knock, and some of the damage was for the second, the aftershock, and you'd had to pay two deductibles. Well, people didn't like that. I don't think you'd like that. And so if an earthquake hits, all the other aftershocks within 168 hours or 1 week counts as one occurrence, so there's only one deductible. Just to give you a heads up there. As far as the property coverage form, get the coverage parts down. All right, coverage A is the building. All right, anything bolted, welded, nailed, attached to the structure, that would be coverage A. Again, insurance companies require you to carry at least 80% of coverage to the value of the building. This is what's called the coinsurance requirement. In the real world, it can be 70 to 90% coinsurance requirements. But for the exam world, it's very, very common that they use the 80% coinsurance requirement. That means whatever the value of the building is, if you wanted to cut costs, you still have to insure at least 80% of the value of the building with this insurance. If you insure for less than 80%, the penalty is you're going to have to pay more of a claim. And we'll get into that coinsurance equation in a bit. Another thing is if you actually do carry 80% of coinsurance to the value of the building, you get 5 extensions for free. Now, the difference between an extension and an endorsement is additional charge for additional features and benefits. Extensions are free as long as you have 80% of coverage to the value of the property. Some common extensions that you're going to get quizzed on your exam is a newly acquired or constructed property. We're going to give you $250,000. So let's say you own a building and you're either building a building next door or you bought the building next door. Now, when you're buying a building next door, it's like buying a new car. You have some time to notify your insurance company and add that building to the policy or get a policy on that building and carry that car. In this case, during that interim period, you have $250,000 worth of coverage for that newly acquired or newly built building. The second extension is we'll also give you $100,000 for contents in that newly acquired or constructed building. All right, so remember, $250,000 for the building and $100,000 for the contents in that new building that you just bought or are building. Some of your executives or salespeople may take some products home, right? Maybe to display it, go sell it, maybe on tour or whatever. And this will give you up to $10,000 for business personal property off premises. Now, with commercial, your property policy only covers items in and around the building, okay, within 100 feet of the premises. So if you're taking any of your inventory away from that 100 feet of the premises of the building, there's no coverage, right? And so, but this extension gives you up to $10,000 for coverage for some of your business property or inventory that's off premises and at another location, okay? Got a question here, Jackie. So the only time it's 100% coinsurance is for builder's risk for the test? Yes. Now, you can actually insure your building here for 100% reconstruction cost, or I'm sorry, 100% of the value of the building, which is great, which is what you should do. In the real world, that's what we typically do. But the test wants to make sure you understand the coinsurance equation, and so they'll use 80%. Okay, so you got it. But coinsurance, yeah, it's for builder's risk. There really isn't any coinsurance. The value of the policy is 100% of the value of the building when it's complete. So builder's risk covers a building while it's being built. Once it's built, then you flip over to this commercial property coverage, and to cut costs, you can drop it to 80% of coverage to the value of the building. Okay. All right. Signs that are attached to the building. One of the extensions is you automatically get $2,500 for coverage on that sign. If that's not enough, then you're going to have to look to some inland marine coverage called sign coverage to raise the value of the sign. Especially, like Las Vegas, you've got these electrical, moving part signs, right? Yeah, and it's going to be worth a lot more than $2,500. And if a loss occurs, you want it replaced, you're going to need to buy the additional coverage. Valuable papers and records. This is maps, manuscripts, drawings, and stuff like that. There is some limited coverage here on the commercial property policy, but realistically, if you are in that world, real estate, valuable papers, records, manuscripts, drawings, and things like that, you should get the inland marine coverage. Okay. So, but these are 5 extensions that are free as long as you have 80% of coverage to the value of the building, or you meet that 80% coinsurance requirement. So if coverage A is the building, coverage B is your business personal property. They're also called contents. This is stuff that's easily movable. It's not bolted, welded, nailed, attached to the building. The easiest way to remember that is, remember, if you flip the building upside down, anything that falls would be contents coverage. Anything that sticks would be building in this case. Right. Now that's covering your business personal property. Coverage C is personal property of others. So let's say you have a dry cleaning service, right? And people leave their clothes to be cleaned, right? Dry clean, right? Maybe alterations, what have you. And then there's a loss occurs, like a fire in the dry cleaning portion of the business. Not only did you lose stuff that you had, you also have losses to the customer's property that's under your care. And that's what coverage C would be about. Another area where this comes into play is like a veterinary hospital where people leave their animals overnight and there's a fire, there's smoke, inhalation, and some of the pets pass away. That would be coverage C. Now, everything in commercial property pays actual cash value. So coverage A will pay actual cash value, coverage B pays actual cash value, and coverage C pays actual cash value. I can understand actual cash value for dry cleaners, replacing your clothes. But I don't know how they calculate actual cash value for a pet if it's, killed in a fire that was in the building. So, but that's the valuation that you need to know for the test. All right. Coverage C, a lot of times you'll hear it called Bailey's coverage, B-A-I-L-E-E-S, Bailey's coverage. And that's where you have temporary possession of other people's property. It's kind of like inland marine, because inland marine basically provides coverage if you have temporary possession of other people's property. The difference between Bailey's coverage and inland marine coverage is the value of the property. Bailey's coverage covers like shirts at the dry cleaner. Inland marine covers like your 4-carat stone, your ring, right, that you're leaving with to be resized, refitted, and cleaned at the jeweler's, and the loss occurs. And so inland marine is more your high-end items. Bailey is more, your shirts at the dry cleaner. More low-end items is how you want to understand that. Okay. Coinsurance. Remember, insurance companies encourage you to carry at least 80% of coverage to the value of the property. In the real world, they can go 70 to 90%, like I said, but the exam very commonly uses 80%. And so, maybe it's a skyscraper that you have, like the building they had in that one picture. And if a loss occurs, you probably won't suffer a total loss. So why are you insuring the building for 100% of value when most likely you won't suffer total loss. And so some people choose to buy lower limits because they don't feel that they're going to suffer a total loss. Okay, and insurance companies recognize this, and so they want you to carry at least, in this case, 80% of coverage to the value of the property. If you don't insure the building for 80% and a loss occurs, even if it's a small loss, then you're going to have to pay more of a claim. You want to know the coinsurance equation. Right? The coinsurance equation is the amount of insurance you did have, that means what you bought, divided by what you should have had. Now, the should is not the value of the building, because the insurance company wants you to carry 80% of coverage to the value of the building. So the should, or the bottom number in this fraction, should be 80% of the value of the building, not the actual value of the building. All right? And then you take that fraction, you can simplify it, and then you multiply it by the loss. That equals how much the policy will pay on your claim minus any applicable deductible. All right? So what you did have divided by what you should have had times the loss equals what the company will pay on your claim. They may give you a deductible, they may not. If they do stay with, there's a standard deductible. Standard deductible on all of our property policies is $250, with the exception of one. A business owner policy standard deductible is $500. Right? So remember, your personal auto, your home, your dwelling, okay, commercial property, the standard deductible is $250. But if it's a BOP, the standard deductible is $500. Now, the alternative also is they may actually tell you there's a $1,000 deductible. So they'll give you the value of the deductible. If they don't, if it says there's a standard deductible, most likely it's at normal property coverage at $250. So be wary of that on the test. All right. So let's go through one of these examples. So we got a building that's valued at $500,000 and it's insured for $300,000. The insurance company requires 80% coinsurance. There's a $120,000 loss. Assuming there's a $1,000 deductible, how much will the policy pay? So the first thing you want to do is, well, hopefully you memorize that equation, is just plug in the numbers. The amount of insurance you did have would be the insurance you bought, and they bought $300,000 worth of coverage. The amount of insurance they should have had is $400,000. $400,000 is 80% of the value of the building. 80% of the value of 500 equals 400,000. So now if you take 300 divided by 400, right, because what you did have divided by what you should have, that simplifies to 3/4. So 3/4 times the loss, which is a given 120,000, equals how much the company will pay on your claim minus any applicable deductible. In this case, they give you a $1,000 deductible. All right, so if we take a closer look, remember what you did have is 300 divided by 400. That simplifies to 3/4. 3/4 times that loss is 90,000. 90,000 minus the deductible is going to be 89,000. That's how much the insurance company will pay. That means this client, because they did not insure the building at 80% to the value, has to pay that the difference, right? Plus that $1,000 deductible. They'd have to pay $31,000. If they actually had $400,000 of coverage, and they should have had $400,000 of the coverage, the company would pay for the whole loss minus the $1,000 deductible. Okay, so again, you may get 2 to 3 math questions on your exam. For most states, that's all you're going to get. So you didn't fail the test because you didn't know math. All right, but to make you feel a little more confident, yeah, go through the questions, get the equation down. You typically will get a question on what is the coinsurance equation, and then you'll get 1 or 2, maybe 3 math questions on that coinsurance. Okay. So now let's try it again. So again, let's say they actually have the right coverage. So the building is valued at $500,000. They insured it for $400,000. The insurance company requires 80% coinsurance. There's a $120,000 loss. Assuming there's a $1,000 deductible, how much will the policy pay? Again, you plug in the numbers. They did have $400,000. They should have had $400,000. All right, so 400 divided by 400 equals 1. 1 times the loss of 120,000 is how much a company will pay on the claim minus the 1,000 deductible. So the company's going to pay 119,000. Our client just has to pay a deductible. And so again, with this coinsurance equation, you're encouraging, on behalf of an insurance company, you're encouraging the client to carry reasonable amounts of coverage so they don't come up short even if it's a partial loss. Right? So this paying more of a claim because you underinsured is kind of called the coinsurance penalty. So you might see that terminology on your exam. All right. Some other items to keep in mind, which we kind of talked about. There's a named insured, and that's anyone who's named on the policy, right? Bill and Bob's Hardware Store. They're both named. The first named insured is Bill, because he's the first one named on the policy, person named in the business, and that's what you're going to put on the information page, on the declaration page. Bill's the one that makes the decisions on the contract. So even though they're both named, the first named insured controls it. The reason insurance companies do this, let's say Bill and Bob get into an argument, and then Bob calls up requesting changes to the policy. Bill calls up making changes to the policy. As an insurance company, we're not going to get caught up in their problems. We go by the first named insured. So when you're writing insurance, like even for personal lines, if it's a couple, you want to ask them, hey, by the way, if the premium's late or if there's an issue with the policy, which one of you should I reach out to? Okay? And then they'll tell you. Don't assume it's him. Don't assume it's her in a traditional marriage, right? Don't assume it's one of the partners. I mean, ask them. And then what you're going to do is, well, I'm going to put their name first on this policy so that me and my staff know that they're the ones we need to reach out to if there's a question associated with this policy or something comes up. Okay? And that's how you want to manage that. All right, so that's first name insured. Now, an insured is anyone covered by the policy that's not named. All right, so like that'd be like personal auto. Jack and Joe have a personal auto policy. Jack's the first named insured on the policy. Both Jack and Jill are named. Jack's the first one named. But let's say they lend a car to the neighbor to go to the store. Well, the neighbor would be covered under their policy because they're using Jack and Jill's car with their permission, although they're not named. So they're an insured, but they're just not named. On the definition section of the policy, it will define we or us. Now, when you see we or us, that's we or us, the insurance company. We or us are going to insure you and your stuff. And so you or yours is related to the insured, the named insured, or for commercial, it's going to be the name of the business. We or us, as an insurer, are going to cover you and your stuff against a loss. But also for liability, we'll cover them and their stuff. That would be third-party loss. All right. So, I mean, even though this seems kind of simple, when you're stressed out taking your test, I don't know, people are stressed out, they don't think right, and they pick wrong answers. So be wary of that. Okay. Vacancy condition. There's two definitions for vacancy, and that depends if you own the building or you're leasing space in the building. Right? So if you're the owner of the building, let's say you have a 10-story building and you have coverage on this building, as an insurance company, we would consider the building vacant if 70% of the building is empty. But instead of saying 70% of the building is empty or not leased out, the exam may say less than 31% is in use. Less than 31%, that means typically 30% is being used. That means 70% is empty. Right? And so we as an insurance company would consider the building vacant. Now, under the vacancy condition, if it's vacant for more than 60 days, the insurance company will not cover vandalism loss, theft loss, glass breakage, sprinkler damage, and water damage. Okay? So there's 5 perils that we will not cover if the property is left vacant or unoccupied for more than 60 days. Now, that's if you're an owner. Now, let's say you're a tenant, your business, and you're leasing space in one of those 3 remaining floors. All right, remember, it's a 10-story building. You lease out each floor, let's just say. And so you're leasing out one of the floors. Well, you have a different definition of vacancy. As an insurance company, we would consider your business vacant if you don't have enough business personal property to run your business. So if you own the whole third floor and you have a printing company, well, we come in and take a look at inspection, and we notice in this whole third floor, all you have is one multi-function fax copier scanner in the corner. That's not enough business personal property to run a print shop. And so the insurance company would classify that as vacant. And again, if it's vacant for more than 60 days, then there's 5 perils we will not cover. All right, that's attempted theft, glass breakage, sprinkler leakage, vandalism, and water damage. Those are the 5 perils that we will not cover. Everything else will be covered minus 15%. Okay, because if the property is vacant, we'll cover if there's a fire loss minus 15%. It's kind of a penalty for having it vacant. Okay. So, and this is where it goes into it. Remember, after 60 days, these 5 perils won't be covered. All the other perils will still be covered minus 15%. That's the penalty. Now, what you can do at the date of application of buying a policy, you can purchase what's called the vacancy permit endorsement. And so if you purchase the vacancy permit endorsement, after the property's been vacant for more than 60 days, we will still cover those specific perils. Those 5 perils that we normally exclude, we'll still cover. Okay? Now, the vacancy permit endorsement covers those specific or specified perils during the permit period, not during the policy period. So if you buy a policy in January and it's, 80% full, your building, and then around April, all of a sudden, people move out, right, to where now it's vacant. Okay, well, it becomes vacant in April. That means after 60 days, we normally don't cover those 5 perils, but with the vacancy permit endorsement after 60 days, which is May, June, we'll still cover the perils. Okay, so this permit endorsement doesn't kick in until the 60-day vacancy period has ended. Then it kicks in and continuously covers those perils that are normally excluded. Now, you can pick and choose 1 or 2 or 3 of the 5 perils, or you can choose all 5 perils to still be covered after the property is vacant for more than 60 days. All right. Value reporting form. So this is one of the add-ons, right, that you can get on your commercial property policy. So this typically is for inventory, right, or for builder's risk. So let's say you have a retail store, you have a clothing store, and it's in the mall, and you're going to have to report to your insurance company how much inventory you actually carry during intervals throughout the year. The reporting periods could be daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or even annually. But you have to report your inventory to the insurance company so they can charge you based on the inventory or contents coverage that you have. So if a loss occurs, we know exactly what to pay. So let's say you have a clothing store, and every 2 weeks you report your inventory. Right? That means your reporting period is biweekly. Right? Now, if you can't report on time, that's okay. You have up to 30 days to still send in your report. But after 30 days, if you don't send in the report and a loss occurs, the penalty is we're only going to pay 75% of the claim. That's a penalty for you not submitting your reports in time. Okay? So that's what that's about. So you have to report your inventory. Now, you can also add something called a peak season endorsement. Because, probably for springtime, summertime, maybe you beef up inventory, right, for the spring sales, right, back to school sales, and definitely Christmas time. And so with the peak season endorsement, it automatically provides 25% of additional coverage for increased inventory, okay? Because you might have ordered it and had it on file before you reported it, and then the loss occurs. So we automatically, can encompass up to 25% additional coverage for that. For builder's risk, this is used when a building is being built. The contractor who's overseeing the building being built, during specific intervals reports the value of the building as it's being built, right? So when they first start construction, there's nothing there. There's just a lot of dirt. And then they start bringing in stuff like cement, girders, beams, wood, air conditioning units and stuff. And so the different intervals, the contractor reports the value of the building during construction. So if a loss occurs, we know exactly how much to pay. All right, so that's where this also comes into play. Right, up to 100% of the value when the building is complete. One more thing, new car dealerships have daily reporting. If you want a new car dealership, every morning when you go out on the lot, you know how many cars are on your lot ready for sale. Mid-morning, you know how many cars were dropped off to add to your inventory. And at the end of the evening, you know how many cars were sold to subtract from your inventory. That would be daily reporting. Okay, so again, depending on the type of business, how frequently they should report. Okay. All right. Business income coverage. Right. This is another one of your coverage forms out of the 13 different coverage forms. Remember the glass coverage, right? Value reporting form. Now we're going into business income coverage. Business income coverage is a consequential loss coverage. Indirect loss coverage. So if a restaurant's destroyed by the fire did the direct loss to the building and the contents. Now, because of that fire where that restaurant is closed because it burnt down, they can't serve food now, right? After 72 hours, business income will start paying missing revenues that the restaurant owner would normally earn if they were open for business. Okay? So it's indirect or consequential loss coverage. You do need to know the business income formula. Now that's net income, or you might see net profit or loss before income taxes, right? And then plus expenses. And also expenses includes payroll. So because of this fire, when the restaurant shut down, after a 3-day wait or 72-hour deductible, the insurance company is going to pay the business owner the missing business income that they would have normally earned, and there's also including payroll. They're including payroll in this payout to keep your staff on hand, so that when they rebuild the restaurant and you're opening up again, your employees will still be there for you. If you don't pay your employees during a shutdown, well, they got to survive. They got to feed their family. They're going to go get hired somewhere else. So then when we rebuild your restaurant and open up, you don't have any employees. Okay, and so yeah, you want to maintain them. All right. So now another cool thing about the business income is after the restaurant's open, we can continuously pay missing business income for up to 30 days after the restaurant has opened. Right? Because when you open up, sometimes it takes a while for your customers to realize, your regulars to realize you're opening back up and start returning. Right? So there could be a decrease in sales when you first open up, and then gradually, hopefully, your customers come back. Okay. And again, like the last bullet here, make sure you understand this is an indirect or consequential type of loss coverage. On the personal line side, that would be like loss of use for a home policy. Your house burns down, and additional living expenses or loss of use covers the cost to put you up at a hotel till they rebuild your house so you can move back in. That's what indirect or consequential loss coverage is about. Okay. You need to know that there's a 72-hour deductible or 72-hour wait before business income kicks in. You need to know the business income formula. Now it's net income, which you might see net profit or loss before income taxes. Right? So it's net income, not gross income. It's before income taxes, not after income taxes. And expenses includes payroll, not excludes payroll. So you've got to watch the terminology on this test. All right. Now, another type of consequential loss coverage is extra expense coverage. Now, whereas business income has a 72-hour wait, extra expenses begins immediately at the time of a loss. So let's say we have a local newspaper. Maybe you're from another country and you basically set up a local newspaper for people of your culture and ethnic background in your area. You have some people in your home country that pass over information to you. You put it in a newspaper, you sprinkle in some local flavor, and you print out a daily newspaper. Okay? And lo and behold, your newspaper plant burns down. Well, you're going to need, because it's a daily newspaper, you're going to need money immediately to get a location, get equipment, and get up and running as soon as possible if a loss occurs. Right? Because remember, it's a daily newspaper. You need to get those papers out on the street the next day, even if you had a fire. All right? And so that's what extra expense coverage is all about. Provides money immediately to get up and running as soon as possible after a loss. So it is, again, a type of indirect or consequential loss coverage. Right? This pays immediately at the time of a loss. Business income has a 72-hour deductible. Right? And you can purchase this by itself depending on the type of business, or you can add it to business income. So some businesses only need business income. Some businesses only need extra expense. Some businesses want both business income and extra expenses. It depends on the business. Right? Another item here is business income from dependent properties. And so let's say you're a manufacturing company, right? So you're your company B here in this diagram. So you manufacture a product. So you rely on a contributing location, a business that you partner with, to provide you with raw materials to manufacture whatever you manufacture. Like maybe it's a chip, a computer chip. So rely on company A to provide you with raw materials to manufacture your computer chip, and then you sell that computer chip to company C, who puts it in their computers and sends it off to the public. So now your business depends on these other companies. You need company A to provide you with raw materials. So if company A has a fire and they close up, you don't have raw materials to manufacture your computer chip, which means you can't sell them to company C, right, for your sales. Likewise, you rely on company C to buy that computer chip from you. So if company C has a loss and they're shut down, they're not going to buy the chip from you, right, which means now you don't have any income coming in, right? So what you can do in your agreements with these companies is you can set up an insurance policy, and you can insure these other companies that you are dependent upon for ongoing continued support, either products or what have you, okay? So you're buying a policy on company A and company C with their permission, but likewise, they're buying a policy on you because they're dependent upon you also. So you want to know the difference between contributing location, your business and manufacturing location, and the recipient who buys your chip from you. Okay. Now, these other companies that you're insuring are totally separate, wholly owned other companies. All right. So if you manufacture or if you have raw materials provided at one of your subsidiaries to give to your business, which is another subsidiary of the same company, that's not going to fly. All right. And so you are dependent upon totally different companies. Where this can come into play, this gets a little into the weeds here. Hopefully I don't get too much in the weeds. Let's go back to you own that clothing store. And you're in a mall. And if you have a clothing store in a mall, you probably want to be as close to an anchor store. Now, an anchor store in the mall is like the big box department store that people will go to that mall to and typically go to, right? And so you want to put your store right next to that anchor store so that people going in and out of that anchor store will pass by your store, poke their head in, and possibly buy some goods from you. You see what I mean? So it increases your sales. Okay, if you want to take it a step further, do you want to be upstairs or downstairs next to that anchor store? Surprisingly enough, upstairs does more business. Okay, so you're upstairs next to this anchor store. Lo and behold, that anchor store closes up. They had a fire. Now remember, it's a covered loss. It's not because they went bankrupt. It's a covered loss. They had a fire, they close up. Now, if they close up and there's no foot traffic coming in and poking your head into your store, that's going to put a dent in your profit margin because there's nobody coming in to buy. And so you're kind of dependent upon that box store, that big department store in the mall. And so what you can do, not really you, but the mall actually can buy a policy on that anchor store. So if a loss does occur to that anchor store, the insurers can actually generate some income to help you sustain until they, hopefully rebuild and open up again and drives that traffic back to your store. Right? So there's a bigger picture in the commercial world than you typically would think of. And I might be going a little bit overboard, but again, just think of, you're dependent upon this other company, right, for survival. All right. Another type of coverage form, condominium association coverage. Now, when you hear condominium association coverage, we have two types of policies. We have the association coverage, which covers the exterior common grounds, the stairways, the hallways, the common areas, maybe the clubhouse. And then you have the unit owner's coverage, which covers your interior unit of a condo. When a condo is typically brand new, first built, it's going to have both. It's going to have the exterior coverage, and it's going to provide the interior coverage, all right, just in case there's some construction issues. All right. Eventually, you're going to go to these condominium association meetings, and you're going to say, hey, is there any way we can cut our dues? And then what they're going to do is they'll say, yeah, we can drop the unit owner's coverage. All right. So then the association covers the exteriors, and you bought your HO6 condo policy to cover the interior units because now you're responsible. If it's a brand new condo that has both exterior and interior, you just need an HO4 because the association unit owners covers your kitchen cabinets and fixtures. But once they drop that coverage, then you want to change your HO4 to an HO6, right? Because now you are responsible for the kitchen cabinets and the bathtub and fixtures. Right? So that's how you want to understand association coverage. Exteriors versus interiors. Builder's risk, we kind of touched on. Basically provides a building while it's being built. Here and there, you'll hear it being called course of construction coverage. And it only covers the items that are being put into the building. Like I said, the cement, the girders, the beams, the wood, the air conditioning units, and whatever is being installed in the building. It does not cover the builder's tools. Because whoever the builder is, the contractor, they should have what's called contractor's equipment coverage, which covers their tools. Because you hired them to bring their tools to build your building. All right. So it only covers the building and stuff that's being put in the building. There is some theft coverage, either part of the building or the building. It's kind of surprising, that there's theft of a building, but yeah, it actually happens, especially if the plumbing goes in, the copper plumbing is going to go unless you have security. There's no liability on this particular program when we're covering a building that's being built because there should no one should be on the premises except for the builders, and the builders are covered by workers' compensation. Right? And like I said, there's no coverage for the builder's tools. And the limited coverage will be 100% of the value of the building when it's complete. And so like you said before, Jackie, yeah, there is no 80% coinsurance on builder's risk. Right? The value of the building is, or the value on the policy is the value of it when it's complete. But remember, during the course of construction, there's that value reporting form where the contractor basically has to determine what the building is valued during the course of construction or while it's being built. So if a loss occurs in the middle of construction, the insurance companies know what to pay if there is a loss. All right, but that's builder's risk. Glass coverage, like I said, even if you had a commercial property broad or special form, your commercial property policy only gives you $100 a window with a $500 per occurrence maximum. It's probably not enough. So by getting the glass coverage form, we're going to cover all the windows on an all-risk basis. Okay, and realistically, the only exclusion is fire and explosion. Your glass coverage won't cover fire and explosion because that's covered under the property policy. So it doesn't need to be included in glass coverage. But it's kind of funny. Say you have a 10-story building, you got glass windows all the way around, and you didn't buy earthquake coverage, and an earthquake destroys your building. So you can't rebuild the building unless you pay out of pocket, but at least your windows will be covered, right? Because the glass coverage will cover all the windows. Since it's all risk, it doesn't exclude earthquake. So you can't build the building, but now you got a bunch of glass. So I guess you can sell it on the street corner. Yeah, but yeah, that's glass coverage form. Leasehold and interest. So let's say you're in an area where you got in early, and your lease payments, your rents are pretty low for your business, and this area in your neighborhood starts booming, where a bunch of businesses move in and it drives the rent price up. But you've got a pretty good lease agreement, and then you have a fire. Okay. So let's say you can't, in fact, maybe the building owner has chosen not to rebuild, right? So you're leasing space. And so number one, you're going to break the lease, right? But since the builder chooses not to rebuild, you can't stay there because there's no building for you to work out of. So you're going to have to rent another location in that area. So let's say you're paying $1,000 a month for rent, but because this area boomed, right? You have a fire, they're not rebuilding, so you can't stay there. You're going to go to another location, and guess what? The rents are now $3,000 a month. Well, your insurance is only going to indemnify you and pay the $1,000 a month because that's what you were paying at the original location. But now you got to move to another location, and the rents have gone up. Well, leasehold interest can also pay the increased rents after loss up to a stated value. All right, so I mean, that can happen. Most people don't realize when you suffer loss, they don't think ahead that this may actually happen, where there could be an increase in rents where we can't afford to rebuild or we can't afford to stay here anymore. And so these additional add-ons can actually help pick up the cost to where you could. All right. Mortgage holders, E&O, this is errors and omissions. I doubt you'll get anything here. This is just an additional one of the 13 coverage forms that I wanted to kind of reach out and cover. But yeah, mortgage holders interest. It's basically the property that's being held in trust, basically your escrow account if a loss occurs. And there may be some liability associated with that. This is a rare one. Okay, so a standard property policy. No, we talked about commercial property coverage covers the building. And most, you have basic, broad, and special. Now, a standard property policy, if you wanted the cheapest minimal coverage policy on, let's say, a close to empty building that you're just waiting for the market to go up to sell, that's what a standard property policy is. So it's pretty much a skeletal policy. It's pretty much the same as a building and personal property coverage form, but it's very, very limited. And being very limited, it's going to be a lot cheaper. And so every once in a while you'll come across this. Maybe there's an old dilapidated warehouse that you just want the minimal coverage on it. That's what the standard property policy would be for. Okay? So we're kind of at an hour. If you haven't registered, like I always say, consider it. But I want to open it up to questions right now. I know I said commercial coverages, but yeah, we spent a lot of time on the property coverage. I hope that's okay. But I will stick around if you do have questions on any other areas. So any questions? David, I did record this. I kind of messed up at the beginning, so but I'll put it out there. I'm still recording now, believe it or not. Yeah, I'll put it out there. Okay, so I'll put it on YouTube openly so you guys can access it. I'll put a disclaimer though. All right. All right. Any other questions here? All right, if there's no more questions, I guess we'll call it a night. Next week, I did put up, we're going to do miscellaneous personal lines. Okay, so I did put the link already out there. So if you haven't taken the test by then and passed it, then definitely come back next Wednesday at 5 o'clock, and we'll cover that. But between now and then, if you do have questions, do not hesitate. Reach out. If you're going through my material, tell me, what topic you need a little more insight on, or if it's about certain questions, tell me which exam, which question you'd like a little more insight or understanding, and I'll definitely respond. So, but other than that, I guess we'll just go ahead and call it a night. All right.